Hey everyone, today we're continuing our part of this journey on something that we value here at New Life, and that is becoming committed. We want to be committed. I think there's an epidemic in the church today that we don't really talk a whole lot about, and that is what I don't even call it, you hear it, church hopping. I think that's an epidemic. That's something where people, you know what they do? They go to different churches, sometimes as much as week to week. They go from one that once you're irritated with something there, you go find a new one, and you get irritated, you find a new one, or not satisfied, you find a new one. Church hopping is an epidemic, because I can guarantee you that is not something that God had ever intended for the church. When the church was created in the book of Acts, it wasn't created to be a thing you hopped from place to place. It was something you would become committed to. You would become empowered and focused in on together with others. I think that's why the early church, when it first was created, says Acts 2:42 says they were committed. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching. They devoted themselves to fellowship. They devoted themselves to breaking of bread, and they devoted themselves to prayer. They were committed to their church. They were committed to this gathering with one another and growing with one another and loving one another, as well as growing and loving God. And this commitment that they had was incredible, because it was an all-in type of commitment. There's a need for that kind of commitment today. We need to be able to plant ourselves in a church and be committed to that place, to call that place home, whether it's through the good and bad, whether it's through the thick and thin, whether it's through the ugly and beautiful things of life, learning how to walk through those things together. Because we see that happen in the early church in the book of Acts, because they were committed, like they were in Acts 2:42. They then, in just a few verses later, they're willing to give up things that were their own so that someone else could have something. They were willing to give up their space in their home for people to be taken care of. They gave up their homes sometimes and sold those things because they knew people were in need. They were so committed to one another that it was like, whatever it takes, that we can help one another. We're going to help one another. And that doesn't happen from church hopping. That doesn't happen to stay in a place for a short period of time. It happens when we plant ourselves somewhere and say, I'm committed here. That then helps us to know how to be committed to being a follower of Jesus, because times with Jesus are going to feel like thick and thin. Times with Jesus are going to feel like good and bad. Times with Jesus are going to feel like ugly and beautiful. But when we're committed to Jesus, then we're able to work through those things instead of hopping from religion to religion or something. We're able to stay truly committed. So my challenge is become a committed individual. Become a committed person here at New Life, or at the church that you already call home. Be committed.